Hey everyone, I am so excited for this episode. I've got with me today an amazing woman, Sulin Sze, a clinical naturopath, a herbalist, specializing in women's health from puberty to menopause. And today we're diving deep into the topic of perimenopause, a topic that's often misunderstood and overlooked. In this episode, we'll be exploring what's really happening in our bodies during this transition, the transition of perimenopause, the common but not normal symptoms women experience, and how we can support ourselves naturally with evidence-based herbal and nutritional strategies. We'll also be exploring the emotional and mental shifts that come with this phase and why perimenopause isn't just an ending, but an invitation into a new empowered chapter of life. I'm really excited to talk about that. And if you've ever felt confused, overwhelmed, or blindsided by the changes in your body, this episode is here to help you navigate perimenopause with clarity, confidence, and the support that you deserve. Let's dive in. Sulin, are you ready?
I'm ready, and thank you for that beautiful intro, Sonia. So nice to be here. And hello to all of your beautiful listeners.
Let's dive in, Sulin. So that is definitely something that I myself have been going through over the last few years. And I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine not too long ago saying, the age of perimenopause can vary. It's not set in stone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So perimenopause is actually it's not marked by how old you are. I think two ways about it. So one is that we can look at the averages around the world, and we see that perimenopause for the majority of women in Australia, the US, Canada, and Europe starts to kick in the early 40s. So you might be talking maybe 42, 43 as the classic years. And I have to say, thinking back, 42 to 43 was when I started to notice that my tummy had a dimpled effect. I can especially remember I was doing a little bit of a belly dance thing in front of the mirror, and I was thinking, that's interesting. I've never seen that contour with the light coming in from the window. So that's kind of where you start to think some things are changing in my body, that I'm not necessarily used to. But as you were mentioning, you're sitting there and you're kind of hovering around 40, right? So sometimes genetics plays a role in it as well, because studies have found that if your heritage is African or African English, African American, if your heritage is also from South America, so Latin America, for example, Mexico particularly, then you might have an earlier onset of perimenopause. So we're looking maybe the late 30s, 38 as kind of like that benchmark year, and possibly also entering menopause earlier than, your Australian counterparts or women in Europe. I also think it's interesting, not for now, but the topic that would be interesting is why is that? Is it just diet, or is it cultural attitudes? Is it acceptance of life phases that women go through? Because even when you look at the particular symptoms of perimenopause, the women in the West seem to really struggle with sleep, stress, and anxiety. That's not the case in other cultures. So, other cultures might have more vasomotor symptoms or more body weight gain or body composition changes. So perimenopause is very dynamic, very culturally influenced. It's, the ages are a little bit fluid in terms of when we might enter it. And the other way that I like to look at it is we talk a lot about lifespan. I was reflecting on this last night. We talk a lot about how long we're living. And as women, we know we live longer than men. So, we've got this. But the thing is that we don't necessarily live better in our older years. So if we can start thinking about health span instead, health span and how well we live and how connected and healthy and, how much time we spend in nature, how we balance life and work and family commitments, that's the sort of thing that will actually influence our perimenopause as well. So it has the potential, if you have a poor health span, to bring you into perimenopause earlier, rather than maybe helping you to get a few more years out of your hormones and your estrogen and your bone density and keeping your body composition, really nice and strong. So yeah, there's a lot of factors, and you're absolutely right. Having that conversation, your friend is surprised, just reflects that we're all So different.
Absolutely, very different. And there's a lot that you speak to in whether it's epigenetic, whether it's genetic, whether it's cultural, whether it's a mix of things, which I'm sure it is a mix of things. I mean, the thought that I had when you were talking about, the culture of the Caucasian people, which is very much a culture where as soon as you're not productive or close to not being productive, you're of no use and you're downgraded in society, as opposed to other cultures that do heed the wisdom of the older woman, the wise woman. And having this position then allows women to transition with more grace. When I think about it, I think, say, Black African Americans that do have earlier onset, that do seem to have stronger symptoms, more potent symptoms. They're still very much stuck as well in this culture that is in the middle of the Caucasian, structure. And obviously there's stress that comes with it, which might also influence the symptoms. I mean, there's so much that comes to it. But before we go right into all of this, how about we back up a little bit and talk about what is perimenopause?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great point. So let's get some basic terminology. So, we're born, we're babies, we're girls, and then we get into adolescence and the periods start. When your periods start, it's called the menarche or the menarche, depending on how you like to pronounce it. So that first day of the bleed is a very specific day. And the day actually where a year has elapsed since your last period is your menopause. Okay, so we're talking about women going from menarche to menopause. And in between then, you've got menstrual periods. But outside of that, you don't. And so then we get to this time where we're in our fertile years. Some women will have babies, some won't, but you're moving through that 20s and 30s, for instance. And that's when you're in pre-menopause. Now, pre-menopause is my ovaries are working, I'm having cycles. This is as you'll kind of fit the average female mold. Maybe I'm having babies. I don't particularly have any issues with my health, and I don't have very active symptoms when it comes to hormones, unless I have a specific condition like polycystic ovarian syndrome, maybe fibroids or something like that. Then you get to a point somewhere in your 30s, sometimes in your 40s, where some symptoms start to emerge. It's not hot flashes usually. So that's a little bit of a myth that, you're not sort of perimenopausal until you get a hot flash. It can be something like, this is what I had blepharitis. So in my eyelids, I started getting a lot of styes, and it's something that's sort of ongoing now. But it can be some small inflammatory change. For some women, it will be aches and pains in the joints. For other women, it will be they're sleeping a little bit lighter. So as soon as you start to get that sort of symptom arising, you are now in perimenopause. But before then, it's premenopause. So premenopause, no symptoms, cycles are normal. Perimenopause, some symptoms, but cycles are still continuing. And the cycles could become a little bit irregular. Sometimes you might have a longer cycle, shorter one, heavier, lighter one, all part of the picture. And so you continue through perimenopause until one day your period stops. Now, the day when your period stops is not menopause. It's part of the whole menopause transition, but it's not specifically menopause. You have to wait a year. So when we sort of say, or when we have the opportunity to say, I am menopausal now, we're kind of looking backwards in time to a year ago, and we're saying, okay, it's been 12 months since my last bleed, therefore now I am menopausal. So menopause is really just one day in time. Perimenopause is actually where ideally a lot of the research would have been focused, because a lot of research into women's health has kind of just for a long time assumed that women are either menopausal or they're not. But there's a really big lead-up transition period to that. Now, but the difference between perimenopause and menopause also is often age. So if you are if you're in the sort of more Western societies, you'll tend to have perimenopause in your 40s and menopause somewhere in your early 50s. That seems to be how it kind of fits. But again, it's different for everybody. And so a year after you've had your last bleed, you're in menopause. Perimenopause has a little bit of a kind of a bleeding into postmenopause. So perimenopause still extends for another year after you hit menopause, which means that perimenopause is still technically the phase you are in for 2 years after your periods stop. And then after that stage, you are fully in postmenopause.
So you're both in menopause and perimenopause for 2 years after your last bleed.
And you're menopausal for 1 day, and then you're postmenopausal. So menopause is kind of not a phase; it's just a
so
day.
It's just the birthday of the start of this very
the new chapter of your life,
right? So really, you get that menopause date, and then you continue your perimenopause for about 2 years, and then you're officially in postmenopause.
Yes, so perimenopause is by the time your periods stop, you've still got another couple of years, until you can fully say, okay, I'm postmenopausal now.
Right.
Now the reason why there is that overlap is because a lot of the associations and the knowledge builders for women's health and hormones, etc., studies, very extensive studies. They've come up with all of these models of women through the ages, through their lifespans, and there's always been overlap.
Yes.
It's just that hormones are not so clear cut, so you can still get some perimenopause symptoms. Exactly. It's hard to say that this is the age, when this happens. So what I mean by that also is I could still be getting my blepharitis when I'm in menopause. It's just because I'm through that period and my periods are stopped doesn't mean that all symptoms go away. I'm still symptomatic for a couple of years afterwards.
I see. So essentially those symptoms that you get in perimenopause eventually stop when you're in menopause. Is that what you're saying?
No, actually they don't. So you can still be symptomatic even though you've hit your menopause day and a year has passed since your last bleed. So you still wait another year to kind of officially get through perimenopause.
Sure. So when you're in postmenopause then is when the symptoms should ideally have gone.
We hope so. There are some that linger, and it's because of the internal changes, right? So one of the misconceptions I think around the human body, this is where holistic medicine is so good. But a misconception is that our bodies are static. We're like machines. We just keep running until one day we give it up. Mm-hmm. But we're actually very attuned to our external environment. We're very dynamic. Our cells change every 5 years or so. So we, at a tissue level, are constantly changing. And what happens in that transition between perimenopause and postmenopause is that our tissues get a little bit drier. And so you can't really stop that process or turn back the clock. And so our tissues are getting more tight, more tense, more dry, a little bit more hot in some cases for women who, for example, get hot flashes and night sweats. So the symptoms that relate to those sorts of changes, they remain. Hot flashes can remain for up to 14 years, night sweats, dry vaginal tissues and atrophy of the vaginal tissues also is something that really just doesn't go away. So that will just continue on and on throughout, I think, until we pass, until we drop our bodies. So, we would hope that many of them, the other ones, the sugar cravings, the chronic bloating, you would kind of hope that if you lived well and you looked after your health span, that you won't have to even think about those in postmenopause because, you've got other stuff to do. I mean, this is when we birth our new babies. Sometimes we have grandchildren or sometimes we have a work project. It's like, finally, I've got time for me to do this and bring this into the world. So, we don't want to be held back by all of those things. But this is why we need to do the work in perimenopause and make sure that we get to a great postmenopause.
And so you're saying there's, of course, symptoms that stay and symptoms that, if you know how to take care of yourself properly, do hopefully go away or get alleviated a little bit. So you've talked about dryness, vaginal dryness, atrophy. You've talked about heat and hot flushes, night sweats. What other symptoms are there that you see quite regularly in your practice?
Okay, number one symptom I see in practice is kind of like my top 3 pain points for my clients. So the first one actually might be surprising. It's chronic bloating. And the chronic bloating comes in combination with increased visceral fat or abdominal fat that resides in the abdomen. So these are the women who are not fitting into anything with a waist that's not elastic, and it just feels uncomfortable. And then they'll start to see that their body composition is changing. And for us in perimenopause, we need to eat and exercise and work very differently to how we would have been in our 20s and 30s. Otherwise, our bodies will give us signals such as bloating and the increased fat gain around the waist. The second pain point is sleep changes. So sleep doesn't necessarily just go bad overnight, but what often happens in early perimenopause is women will get this somewhat lighter sleep, so more easily awakened. If you have a partner that tosses and turns like I do, it can get very frustrating in perimenopause because every little brush of the pillows will wake you up. Sounds on the roof will wake you up. Things that you would have slept through before when you were younger. With sleep also, there's that wakefulness, but for some women, I've noticed this, if they're really stressed and they don't have great work-life balance, the hot flashes and night sweats will kind of seep in to the sleep as well. So their sleep then is seen to be changing because they're getting awakened by a night sweat or waking up.
And we all know that heat
sweating
at night is a marker of that's going to influence our sleep massively. We do need to regulate our coolness at night to be able to have quality of sleep. So obviously that's going to influence how well we sleep too. Not only how long, but how well.
Yes, I totally agree. And my partner actually is a hot sleeper, so he's always needs aircon or fans. And I grew up in kind of tropical Singapore. Like I'm fine with heat. You can put me in a hot room, I'll fall asleep. So yeah, I mean, obviously the night sweats is not my issue, but being very sensitive to noise definitely is. So the third pain point would probably be, it definitely is this one. It's a change in the menstrual bleed. So menstrual bleeding is a wonderful reflector of how you're doing hormonally. If you're taking the oral contraceptive or if you're on a Mirena or an IUD or something like that, it's not going to be as easy to assess how well you're doing hormonally, But if you're not and you're just having normal natural cycles, you can use those cycles to give you a little bit of a running sheet on whether you've got too much estrogen, too little, too much progesterone, unlikely, too little, whether you're ovulating or not, and whether you're highly stressed as well, because some women their periods will get delayed if they're highly stressed. So what can happen in perimenopause is progesterone starts to fall in early perimenopause, and it just kind of very gradually declines, but it's consistent. It doesn't just decide to pop up one day and like flourish. It's just constantly falling. So women will notice that their periods reflect this and they get very heavy bleeds. It's kind of like the bleeds where you might not go out that day because you're worried, if I sit on someone's white couch, like what could potentially happen, or can't wear light colored clothing, or I have to wear, I have to double up my protection, whether I'm using whatever form of sanitation you're using, sanitary pads, etc. So the heavy bleeding is called menorrhagia, and it means the flooding. So the floodgates have opened because we actually need progesterone to control the rate of bleed. And if you don't have enough progesterone, there is no control over how quickly you bleed. And what you might notice if you're in perimenopause and your cycles are starting to change is that you never really worried about wearing overnight pads, but now you're wearing them in the day. Or you wake up in the morning and you get out of bed and then it's just all flowing out. So that would be a classic sign. Yeah,
What
so that would be
about
number 3.
clots? Is that related to the progesterone changes as well, or how does that sit?
Yeah, well, clots, there is definitely a lot of clotting in heavy bleeds. However, there are 2 things about clots that I've always noticed. The first one is that usually there's pain when there is a clot. And so you look out for pain, and if there's no spasm or pain, you wouldn't expect there to be many clots. And the second thing I've noticed is actually the reason why there is pain. So from more of a holistic perspective, the clot reflects that the blood is not flowing through the uterus well. And when you don't get good flow of blood, you get blood which stagnates. So the blood will basically pool, and that's what leads to the formation of a clot, which is a perfectly natural process because the body says, wow, got a lot of blood in this area. Let's try and tighten that up. Let's dry it out. And so you end up with this big, thick, sort of fleshy clot-like substance. And in order for the uterus to be able to get rid of that clot that is just sitting there stagnant, it needs to put some force into it. And that's where you get the spasm from. So it's very unusual for women to have pain with their periods unless they're trying to get clots out. And they may or may not even realize it because the clot might just come out, might not even see it.
I mean,
that's
a personal perspective, the clotting has started pretty much, when I felt like, okay, I'm probably transitioning. And I had never had pain as well in my periods, and it started. And I went to see a Chinese medicine practitioner, and she was like, oh yeah, your qi is stagnant. You need to increase your qi. And, and I was like, all right, let's figure that out. But that is something that I think Western medicine does not address well. All these symptoms and what it really means on a holistic, with a holistic perspective and how to deal with it. I mean, even just understanding what it means is a big game changer to appreciating and handling your symptoms.
So, I was thinking about this as well, because if you go back 100 years ago, most of the doctors were male. So they would be, say, middle-aged men or older men, and there were literally hardly any studies on women, because at that stage, women are too delicate. We can't put a woman through a clinical trial. And of course, there's an ethical aspect to that. Like, what if we trial her with something, then she falls pregnant? I mean, this is an ethical dilemma. So, of course, the knowledge of women would be very poor and pretty shallow, to be honest, to the point now where, we know a lot more about women, and we have a lot more female doctors who are leading the way as well, and we have a lot of really innovative strategies coming out, including government support over the next 5 years. So we can kind of see that the attitudes are changing, and we'll get to know more.
It's great to see that in the kind of Western world.
It's about time.
And
though,
when I
it?
hear you, it's like, yes, it's true from this part of the international culture. But I mean, with your background, my background being half Tunisian, half French, and I've been raised by my Tunisian mother. So having a strong tie to the North African culture and the North African ways of things there. And I relate very much to the native of Australia, the First Nation people, in the way we relate to health, because we always gave a lot of importance to the wise woman. Then all this knowledge and this connection through community and talking and sharing what's going on and sharing tools, I feel like that's been lost in the Western side of things, and that's slowly being recuperated with this movement of women's empowerment, women's health research that's finally blooming and starting to rise. But in the Tunisian side of things, that's been the case for thousands of years. And so there's also, I think, a very important piece for us to look to other cultures and maybe understand that there's a different type of science than the one that happens in the labs. And so if you have a grandmother, go and talk to her. She might know things, I think that really is important, and I'm hoping that the research will include those things as well.
I would hope so. I mean, I'm perhaps a little bit skeptical about the research side of things. It takes about 17 years to translate something that's been researched to a treatment that you can put into effect. So I don't know what I'm going to be like in my late 60s by then. So
I'm sure you'll be writing more books. You'll be fine. I'm sure you'll be helping science with whatever you create and research on your own as well. And I think that's why those conversations like the one we're having today are super important. I think we need to share information, whether it's been studied or not, that is useful. And so with that, I mean, we've just talked about progesterone, but you also hinted at other hormones. Tell me a little bit more about all of their role and how that impacts our perimenopause and what to look out for, if you can.
Yes, absolutely. I actually didn't list all of the symptoms, though. Should I give you a few more symptoms before we move on?
You're absolutely welcome to.
Because I don't want to kind of gloss over those ones as well. So apart from things like the heavy bleeds and the weight gain, women will generally have an increase in appetite around perimenopause and find that they're eating more. So it's very important to eat healthy. They'll also find that their brain function changes a little bit. And the reason for that is the brain is trying to recalibrate to use different types of fuel that are required, that will be required in postmenopause particularly. So cognitive changes, even ADD or hyperactive sort of, I guess, manifestation of that cognitive issue can come up. Many folders open in the head at once, for example. And memory issues, so short-term memory particularly, can be an issue. Then there's breast changes, so your breasts might get bigger for a period of time, then they might get smaller for a period of time. There might be breast pain or breast tenderness. There can be other urogenital issues. For example, thrush is a big one, so chronic thrush that just keeps coming up with every bleed can be a real issue for a lot of women. Now, you can get the heavier cycles, but some women also get very light cycles. And a spreading apart of the period so that maybe they're coming every 28 days, and then it's every 26 days, and then it's every 32 days, and then it's every 2 months. So it becomes quite hard to predict. Another one is headaches, migraines can come up, allergies, food intolerances can emerge at this stage of life, so it's not just something that happens to kids, and a lot of chronic inflammatory issues. And then also waking up stiff in the morning, aches and pains. So they would be the other classic signs to look out for.
So is this what you use as markers to decide whether someone is going through perimenopause, or what are the tests there?
Oh, great question. A lot of it is determined by symptoms. So you would look at what symptoms someone is experiencing, look at where they are placed in life. So what's their age? Are there any other factors involved, such as did their mother go through an early menopause, or sisters? Have they had any conditions as well? For example, have they had any conditions that would reflect issues with estrogen or progesterone particularly? So you'd look at everything, and you would mainly go by symptoms, because the thing about hormones is they change day by day. If you look at something like cortisol has a rhythm. So it's high at some stage of the day, it's low at other stages of the day. So you could send your client away to have a blood test. They could come back, say it's fine, and you really don't know. The only way you're going to know is if they come back and their blood test is abnormal, and then you start investigating. It's exactly the same with estrogen and progesterone. So depending on where they are in their cycle, they might be presenting in the normal sort of range or not. So when I say it, with estrogen and progesterone, it's the same issue. You might have even a high estrogen tendency, and so your estrogen levels might look normal, and your doctor might be really impressed with how high your estrogen is in your late 40s. But again, it's all relative to you. So you could just be at a stage where estrogen has decided to surge, because it does that. Absolutely. In perimenopause, and you might go back the next day and have a really poor score and have that sort of formication, or, like when you have this feeling like ants are crawling over your legs, it's called formication. You might have things like that happening the next day.
And of course, it depends on the base level as well, right? If your levels of estrogen are usually high, then when you start seeing drops or changes, it might actually look like the normal average. So
that's exactly right. Yes. And a lot of those tests, when they create ranges, they're based on averages. They're not really based on optimal. So if you get a whole population and the whole population is receiving less and less sunlight and getting more and more vitamin D deficiency, then your average for vitamin D levels in that sort of group is going to go down, which means that when you start testing future generations, your expectations are actually a lot lower for what you would want their vitamin D levels to be. And
that's an
similarly,
excellent point.
we can run into that issue with hormones.
We talked a bit earlier about, the potential impact of culture and environment on the symptoms of perimenopause and on when the onset starts. Obviously, nutrition plays a massive role in how affected we are. Can you tell me a little bit more about, other than with the lifestyle changes that are going to come, we need to adapt. And so in terms of maybe nutrition, or are there other lifestyle changes? You talked about exercising a bit differently earlier. What really can be helpful in general? Obviously, every woman being different, but in general, what have you seen to be useful and helpful?
Okay. I might preface that by saying what I find to be very unhelpful. And, because of the lack of research and understanding about women's bodies, what I do find unhelpful is health advice that is based on research conducted on men, including research conducted on older, more sedentary men, because their bodies are thought to be closer physiologically to a woman's body. The only thing that is going to be helpful is following advice that comes informed by research on women's bodies and women's bodies of this age. So I see a lot of really fantastic social media posts on different types of exercises for women in perimenopause. And I look at the women who are doing the moves and they look about 23. And I'm thinking, I don't know whether this is really for a woman in perimenopause.
Yes.
We just need to keep it very age consistent. Yes. And not give a lot of conflicting messages, because for a woman in her 20s and a woman in her 40s doing the same workout, there's really different propensity for the effect it's going to have on her insulin levels, on her metabolic health, on her cortisol levels, even, just her resilience, her physical resilience. So I find it unhelpful sometimes to look at research unless I know where it's come from and what it's based on. The things that I find really helpful, believe it or not, is like you were saying, getting back to the old school traditions. This is why I wrote about going out and wildcrafting plants and foraging for your food and your medicine, or growing plants on your balcony. I grow ashwagandha, dandelion, lemon balm, bacopa. I grow the main herbs that I like to take in my home on my balcony, because I think it's the closest I'm going to get to what my ancestors would have been eating. And, they did not quite live as long, but they lived well. And so I go back to even things like very, very kind of raw eating. So I went off processed food, a while ago, because I thought what I'm actually eating is I don't know how long it's going to live in my cells and clog them up, and how it's going to affect my liver. And I've never felt better, to be honest. So if I see something in a packet, I always question, do I absolutely need this, or how do I make it myself? I'll go and look up a recipe. So eating foods that you have made yourself, cook your own bread, grow your own dandelion leaf, put it on your bread in the morning, throw on some avocado, sprinkle of nuts or seeds, and you're set.
And by the way, dandelion grows everywhere. You just need to go around town and you'll find dandelion. It's crazy.
Yeah. Did you know that dandelion regenerates soil? And that's probably why it does grow everywhere, because it's saying, this is earth that needs healing. So I'm going to pop up here. I'm going to regenerate this soil. But I would recommend growing it yourself, because if you put it in organic soil, it won't draw up any of the bad stuff.
Exactly.
So you grow it yourself. Yeah, now old school stuff like if I'm going to make lunch, I don't put a heap of salt on my food, just a little bit of salt and seasoning, but I like things really plain. And my hubby doesn't love things plain. So there's always going to be a little bit of compromise. Like, this is my dinner on the side. I've got my plate of steamed broccoli and green beans and edamame.
By all means, spice it up yourself.
And yeah, that's your one over there. So sometimes I even eat separately to the boys, like they have their food and I'm sitting in with them, but I've just got my bowl of greens. So I find it helpful, cheaper, and pretty easy just to go back to the absolute basics. Lots of vegetables, lots of fruit. You really can't go wrong, and you're not going to get swept up into very complex diets of having 2 grams of this and 1.6 grams of that. And oh my God, it's such a...
And honestly, when you think about it,
crazy.
The thought process, the anxiety that goes into counting everything is kind of counteracting the whole point of having a good diet, because try and metabolize something when you're stressed, it's a lot harder. So might as well eat something that feels good to you and listen to your body. I mean, I'm a big proponent in my work of listening to yourself, and including understanding how to listen to your body. Your body will literally tell you what you need to eat if you know how to listen. It will literally tell you how much is enough or if it's not enough. And so having this kind of practice as well of mindfulness and listening to your body, super helpful and super healing, as opposed to, as you say, counting the grams and counting the macros and micros and being like a mad scientist and getting absolute anxiety around it. Yeah. And that's a good point as well. What you're mentioning, being okay having a different dinner than the people that are around you, or lunch or whatever you're eating. It's okay to have your own thing happening. The whole point is really to have a communal time, not necessarily a communal meal. So I think that's also very important to remind women it's okay to have that little moment of, I call it selfishness, and people don't like this word, but selfishness is really understanding what is good for you and doing it. It's not taking away from someone else. So be selfish, ladies.
Yes, and also be an advocate for your own health. I have that genetic abnormality where I can't break alcohol down, so I've never really been able to drink. And the amount of social pressure that I've been through in the last 30 or so years, going out with friends, and they're all drinking and, aren't you going to have it? No, I'm not going to have any of that because, I'm going to stand up for myself. I don't need to be doing this just to fit in.
Yeah.
So I think I've kind of already been quite used to just doing things that work for me.
Oh, 100%. And I've done the same thing. I don't have that genetic component to alcohol. I can absolutely withstand it, but I don't like how it makes me feel. I know that it makes my stamina drop massively, and I love going surfing and having all the energy that I need to do it. So I know it's going to be a hindrance to a lifestyle that makes me happy. And so for a long time, and every now and then I'll do enjoy a little glass of something, but generally I will not. And I've had the same thing. You go to the pub and people expect for you to drink. And I would come up with ways to make it look like I'm drinking. So I'd get, sparkling water with lime in it and pretend there's vodka. And then eventually I'd be like, you know what? No. And I started having this conversation of, if you were a smoker and I told you no, you wouldn't force me to smoke. So why are you trying to do that with alcohol? To me, it's the same thing. It's a poison to my body. I don't want it. And so it's interesting also, this whole cultural pressure we can get, and that's true in many aspects, not just what we eat or drink. It's in the activities that we have at whatever age we have, in however we dress, especially for us women. There's a lot of rules around what we must and must not do. And so learning to stand up for yourself without the need to explain, without the need to fight it, I guess. Just being like, this is me. It's so important. And it's not easy at first, I must say. So in this case, your meals, you've got the practice, of course, of, being able to say, this is what I'm doing. And I'm sure your family is used to you doing that as well, knowing that you care very much for your health and knowing that that's what's best for you. It's a great teaching for your children as well, I suppose, and for your partner to be able to say, oh, well, when I know what's best for me, I can do it too. And no one has to discuss this.
Yeah, great point. And I think for my hubby, when I cut out processed foods, it also meant that I was cutting out things like, the butter chicken sauce he might bring home from the supermarket. And then what he noticed me drop the kilos and drop the waistline circumference. And he could see the effect it was having in my body. So it was, I thought that was probably just another way for him to understand. And because up till he started noticing that, I think at the beginning there was a bit of resistance, Oh, you're not going to eat with us. What, I'm eating with you? I'm just eating something else. Or,
Yes.
I've cooked dinner. You're not going to have any. That's a hard one, someone's cooked dinner for you and then you say, no, I'm not going to have it.
Probably the same as you. I'm a big fan of knowing exactly what goes into your food. And so even with spice mixes, I don't buy them. I mix my own spices. Again, being raised Tunisian, I know what spices are, like what the effect are of the spices on health. My mom would heal me with gut problems, cumin with oil on my belly button, or, mint with this. And so I know instinctively, and also from having seen it, what spices do, what food does, what plants do. And so I like knowing what's going on in the things that I put in my body. And the side effect is the pre-made thing is actually never as good as the homemade thing. So then there's the advantage as well of taste buds. And so not only it tastes better, you know what's going on in there, and you're making medicine.
I love that.
I think that's, So for you, it's education through, here's what I look like now. How about, we acknowledge that it's useful. And circling back to the conversation of hormones, food, etc. I know that the Tunisian diet has a lot of legumes, a lot of fiber, a lot of protein, and it's all very much, from raw ingredients, not processed. Even the spices, you pick, like I import my spices. Every time I go on holidays in Tunisia, I'll bring spices with me. That's how nerdy I am with my food.
I love that. I love that.
I'm the weirdo that comes back with like a kilo of spices, 3 liters of olive oil made in Tunisia because I know it's well made. So question, phytoestrogen, we've talked about that, I think, or we haven't yet actually. So,
we were going to circle back to the hormones and talk about the hormones. But first I want to say, I'm very interested in learning more about Tunisian culinary arts now. I'm intrigued.
With pleasure.
Yeah. So yes, maybe some other time we can talk about that. So anyway, yes, the hormones. The one that a lot of people focus on is estrogen, because estrogen deficit, which is the picture of menopause, has always been the focus of things like menopausal hormone therapy, or at least research studies. You see that estrogen jumps up and down throughout perimenopause and really doesn't decide to hit its absolute lows until you're starting to edge close to menopause. And when the periods stop and, there's no cycles for a few months, you can pretty much say, yes, estrogen is going to be very, very low now. If not, it's kind of out the door. We then go on to produce other types of estrogens apart from the one we had when we were younger. So we have about 17 or more different types of estrogens in the body. And the one that makes our skin glow and our hair grow and makes us feel joyful and exuberant and energetic and gives us great physical resilience when we're exercising is estradiol, which is E2. So it's usually abbreviated to E2. That one is the one that goes up and down and all over the shop. It's also the one that when it gets quite high will tend to contribute to endometriosis, fibroids, and other types of estrogen-driven conditions. So we have to be a little bit wary of having too much of it, but we definitely don't want to have too little in our 40s. And progesterone is the one that kind of comes up behind it, and they have a role where they balance each other out. Probably more accurate to say that progesterone reins the estrogen in. Estrogen grows, proliferates, expands, explodes. Progesterone soothes and calms and grounds. And the reason why a lot of women in their 40s, as they move towards the 50s, start to feel less soothed, less calm, less grounded, more in their heads, more irritable, more unpredictable emotionally, is because the progesterone, it has been declining, continues to decline, and is getting very low. And so when progesterone does get very low, you not only get the symptoms of low progesterone, but you get progesterone not being able to control estrogen. And so then you get an imbalance occurring. So the hormones are dropping, but along the way, you can run into issues where they get out of balance, and then you can have problems. You can have the really heavy bleeds, for example, or you might suddenly get migraines, or you might have irritability, anger, frustration. I guess the difficult thing sometimes to do is to separate that from stress, anxiety, urgency culture. Like it's hard sometimes to make that distinction. There are other hormones as well in the background. So we've talked about the sex and reproductive ones. Testosterone's part of that too, and you don't want to lose too much testosterone in your 40s either, because it's also protective for your bones and gives you good resilience. But the metabolic ones are particularly important. So insulin resistance is something that has been coming up a lot for women in their 40s and mid-40s to mid-50s. And it is when you're getting towards that pre-diabetes state. Insulin is a hormone that's produced by the pancreas. And basically, it helps you take energy from the food you're eating and get that energy into your cells. The number one thing that will tell you you've got insulin issues is you eat and you're still tired, or you eat and you're still hungry. And you know then that that mechanism of getting the energy from the food into your cells is not working. So insulin will tend to kind of keep increasing in the 40s, and the more sugar you eat and the more you fast for too long, or you aren't eating the right sort of foods, too many carbs, not enough protein, the higher the insulin gets, the more resistant your cells become to it, because they've heard it all before and they're not going to react as strongly this time. Yeah, so they adapt to really high levels of insulin. And that's why you're not getting the energy from your food, because the insulin can't work and the cell receptors won't let it bind. So insulin resistance is one of the areas I'm always screening for.
Quick pause. I want to share with you two things that are so supportive of me every single day. First, with their medicinal mushrooms and herbal blends, Superfeast has been a game changer for me. It's helped me with energy, with immunity, with focus, and with stress support. All the things that I need for what I do. Second, Australian ceremonial cacao, my favorite cacao brand, to support you with your mood, emotional regulation and clarity. And if you're a woman, it's great for your well-being. If you want to try them, use the code WMWHealth, all in capital letters. I'll put the links in the show notes. Now let's go back to the episode.
And it's another reason why I don't recommend a lot of fasting and intermittent fasting for women in perimenopause. And if you're going to do it, by all means do it, but maybe skip dinner. It's like that skipping of breakfast in the morning is not great at all for our hormones. So there's insulin. Now, while that's all going on, picture this. You've got two other hormones that regulate your appetite. Leptin tells you you're full. Ghrelin tells you you're hungry. And I think about ghrelin like the gremlin, because it reminds me of the name, but also it is the gremlin of your hunger system. So what happens is there was a study done on perimenopausal women. They looked at leptin and ghrelin. They found leptin could also keep increasing, which would kind of make you think, doesn't that make me, more full, more satiated? What actually happens is you then develop leptin resistance. Whole problem again. Same thing, yeah. They also found that ghrelin increases about 6 times higher in perimenopause. So picture yourself, in your 30s, you're a little bit hungry. Picture yourself now in perimenopause and you're 6 times hungrier. And it can also lead to a situation where women in perimenopause think, or maybe don't track, how much they're eating, because the hunger hormone ghrelin is always in the background, like,
And then you
I'm
go
hungry.
full circle because you're
Sleepy.
eating more. And so you get that visceral fat, and then you get those symptoms that are related to, pain and clotting and all these sort of things. So you just go full circle when you keep feeding the same.
Absolutely. And you get more tired because if you can't metabolize food, it's not what we eat, it's what we assimilate. So if you can't metabolize your food, then you're more tired. So you don't get up in the morning, you don't exercise, you don't get first light, daylight, which actually can help you to lose that visceral fat. Don't get out in nature, you don't do the calming things. So it's as you say, it's a vicious cycle. So the metabolic hormones are really important. There's some other hormones that are kind of worth a mention too. Your FSH, which is your follicle stimulating hormone, is one that we can use to usually diagnose at the very later stages of perimenopause because it will be getting higher and higher and higher. But again, it pulses. It's a pulsatile hormone. So it's there one day and gone the next. So we have to be consistent with the testing. And LH, luteinizing hormone, is the one that makes you ovulate. And when LH kind of like gives up the ghost, that's when you stop ovulating. And that's when you stop making a lot of your progesterone. So it's a good one to track just in case there's a lot of anxiety or heavy bleeding. And then you think, okay, what's going on with progesterone? Well, maybe she's not ovulating. So that's kind of like the picture of all of those hormones. And you can see when they come together, it's a bit of this storm of metabolic issues, and your skin gets that crawling sensation. Then you get the weight issues. You've got at the same time hot flashes, night sweats, and it's a party.
And hunger and insulin resistance and all of it. It's a great puzzle to be solving. I mean, I see why this is so interesting. We've talked about anxiety coming from those hormonal changes as opposed to just anxiety because of whatever's happening in your life. And so sometimes it's hard to differentiate. Is there something you tell your clients that helps them figure it out? Or is it just, hey, let's test you, or you've got perimenopause that explains why you're feeling like this?
So I do a lot of screening with my clients when they, in fact, even before I see them, they'll be filling out my intake form. That I use that as a bit of a screening tool. And then I have specific questionnaires I've developed to use in clinic where I can ascertain what's happening with the progesterone and estrogen balance, and also what's known as the HPA axis. So this is a sort of like a network of hormone communication that goes on between the brain, your ovaries, and your pituitary, anterior pituitary. So that tells me also whether the thyroid's gotten involved, whether the adrenals are involved as well. So I tend to use those a lot, and I do very little saliva testing or blood testing, because usually I don't need it. Usually the body will speak for itself. And even if you go back to what is a hormone, back to, this is why naturopaths study biochemistry and anatomy and physiology. We learn about what a hormone is. It's a chemical messenger. So when you have a hormone symptom, you are receiving a message from the body, and we are trained to decode it. It's kind of like, Morse code. That's kind of what we're doing, but it's on another type of realm.
100%. I have a similar practice with emotions and cravings from the body and thoughts. It's the same thing. To me, they're all messages. And so a lot of what I use to help with mood swings, with heightened emotions, with whatever might show up that doesn't feel right is a lot of holistic practices, meditation, breath work, nature time, food. Do you think that these tools can be also useful in managing perimenopausal symptoms?
I would say that's probably where you would want to start. You would want to start there. The herbs are fantastic for getting a grip on those hormone symptoms, and usually we can do it within a few months. So if it's just a menstrual cycle issues, and let's say someone's getting headaches with each cycle, or maybe they're getting thrush with each cycle, or maybe they're getting really uncomfortable bloating 2 weeks before a cycle starts, and then for another week afterwards, and so that's 3 weeks out of the month. I'll get them on herbs straight away, and usually within 3 cycles, those problems are either managed or fixed. But what you're talking about is, again, what I like to think of as, yes, we go back to holistic principles because you're creating a health span. When you create a good health span, you get good health as a result. And also, if you're doing the mindfulness, the meditation, if you're putting your feet on the earth, if you're taking time for self, don't forget that every cell in your body is receiving the message that you are important and you are receiving self-care and attention. It can also shift your perception of your symptoms in a sense, you know. So you might have had symptoms that were bothersome before. So let's say you were frustrated with waking up stiff in the morning because you'd been told that you need to be exercising, you know, every single day, and you need to be doing F45 to lose your body weight and all this stuff. So there's the stress and the urgency kicking in that then makes the symptoms feel like they're standing in your way of living your beautiful life. It's just a little adaptation in terms of doing other things. You feel looser, freer. You're realizing that you actually love your beach walks much more, or your morning walks through the suburbs, looking at the trees and plants, and you're actually getting a lot out of that. And it shifts the emphasis now on that symptom is holding me back. And, you know, and then you can kind of get into, yeah, okay, maybe I'll eat more oils in my food. Maybe I'll have some magnesium-rich leafy green vegetables. I'll eat more broccoli, more kale, more sprouts, and the aches and pains will reduce. Or maybe I'll have some oily fish, you know, so you can definitely go back to all those principles.
Sulin, you're hinting a little bit at, you know, oil-rich foods and magnesium-rich foods. What are the foods that are really going to support the transition and health generally for women, and especially when we look at hormones?
Actually, the recommended diet is the Mediterranean diet.
Tunisia.
So as you can imagine, partly why I was so intrigued and curious about the Tunisian diet. So yes, olive oil, first pressed, cold pressed, good quality oils like that are going to be great. The body knows how to manage them. It's going to lubricate your eyes, lubricate the mouth. Another weird little symptom that women get in perimenopause and menopause is mouths get dry. So there's a lot of clicking noises in the mouth. And then also lubricating the skin so that your skin is nice. It's not getting too dry and looking like lizard skin. And then in terms of the sort of the main bulk of protein in the diet, it's actually better if it comes from plant sources. So when you were mentioning legumes, etc., perfect. You know, eating lots of legumes is fantastic. If you love your beans and your chickpeas, that's wonderful. Don't forget your mung bean sprouts you can put on top of your salads and your toast and your soups and stews. Don't forget about zucchini, squash, all those beautiful sort of leguminous vegetables. And so, yeah, I would say that you don't necessarily need to be eating red meat to get your fats, but you can get your fats from plant-based foods as well. When it comes to nuts and seeds, I'm a huge nut fan, and I make my own nut and seed spread. So if anyone wants the recipe for that, they can reach out. I can send it to you as well. I just love this spread because it's got pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, it's got hemp, it's got sesame seeds. And just in that, you've got calcium, magnesium, all your vitamins. You've got a little bit of protein as well. And you can always work your herbs into this too. You know, if you like particular herbs like stinging nettle, which has a huge amount of protein in it, and all of the fat-soluble vitamins, if you're looking at fats, you can put your stinging nettle into your olive oil and leave it there for 2 weeks and get a nettle oil, you know, and you can use that in your cooking or whatever.
Yeah.
So I do love making things like that. If I don't do that, I'll notice that I'm hungry all the time. So I know they're giving me my protein. And I love snacking on like Brazil nuts or cashews or almonds, or just really got into nuts actually now that I think about it, because I never used to like specific nuts, and now I give them all a chance. I'm like, I'll try that. I never used to be into walnuts, but I suddenly had this massive craving for them.
So interesting how, well, your body definitely knows, hey?
Definitely, yeah. And the research also supports Mediterranean diet, by the way. When I was looking into which diet would be best to recommend to my perimenopausal women, It always came out tops. The latest research actually is showing that it's Mediterranean, slightly modified, so it has to have a lot of green foods in it. So, for example, your kale broccoli, fixing up my
You were
words
thinking
there.
of Brussels sprout?
Brussels sprouts, absolutely, my broccoli. And then just basically any dark leafy greens. This in combination with your typical Mediterranean diet where you have lots of tomatoes, lots of onions, garlic, olive oil, a little bit of seasoning, lots of herbs, thyme, oregano, cooking them with your food, wonderful, and a little bit of meat on the side, but not necessarily. You could go vegetarian if you wanted to. So that's proving to be the next best thing. And then on top of that, there are foods which are rich in soy, or soy is one example, sorry. There are foods that are rich in phytoestrogens, which are a plant version of an estrogen. And there are specific ones that actually work on estrogen receptors, and they kind of encourage some activity in those estrogen receptors, and they support the estrogenic effects in your body. And they're called phytoserms. So naturopaths will generally recommend this sort of diet where you do have those soy foods because they're very rich in the plant estrogens, and they can help you with your symptoms. If you look culturally, Southeast Asia and Japan seem to fare the best in terms of perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. Now you look at their diet, and their diet has a lot of the kind of ancient cultured tofu, tempeh. They're drinking soy milk, so there's definitely a correlation there.
Yeah, when I looked into our conversation and I researched a little bit of, because I'm very interested in the difference of symptoms depending on region of the world or genetic background or cultural background. And it seems like Japanese and Chinese women have the longer period time, so their perimenopause starts later than the average woman. And it might most likely be related to, that element of what the diet looks like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely. Now, there's something else worth thinking about here as well is the cultural attitudes. So whether or not they're delineating menopause from just being a woman who is maturing, and whether they're talking about it as a menopausal symptom. I often wonder about that when I see some of the studies, because some of these cultures, I mean, I know this from being of Southeast Asian heritage, don't talk a lot about women's stuff. It's accepted, it's normal, and women are respected, and women are seen as wise. But not necessarily talking about it in the way that we do in the West, where we're scrutinizing every symptom. So I sometimes wonder whether those studies also could be influenced by that.
Do you find that in the Southeastern Asian culture, there's a lot of, because I know from my perspective with the Tunisian side of thing and Northern African in general, there's this thing where women gather. There's moments where it's just women talking about women stuff. And so is that a thing as well in, your background, cultural background as well? Because definitely that would influence how we see ourselves as we age, because we get to spend time with those women that are aging. We get to hear from them and share with them. Do you have that as well?
I left Singapore when I was 15, so I did not see it.
No idea.
Yeah. I'd love to have known that. I'm not really sure, but I know that I didn't have it here.
No, here it's crazy. I think for me, that's one big pain point that I find in Australia is the lack of gatherings, true connected gatherings, whether it's people in general or women with women, men with men. That's something that I think is missing wildly. And I mean, for having known it, I really feel the lack of it. It would be probably easier if I hadn't known it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's hard to reproduce here. And I find that at least it's easier with foreign people who are coming from overseas, so immigrants, because there's a little bit more of that. Australia, to me, seems very lacking in that realm, which definitely influences mental health. definitely influences emotional health, definitely influences, just transgenerational knowledge. And that impacts everything, including, what we're talking about today. So definitely I am a big proponent in trying to create those sort of communities, trying to open the conversations, trying to find that space for women in particular, because I am part of the women group, to have that opportunity to share and receive from people who either have gone through it, are going through it, or will go through it. And there's this beautiful connection that comes from it, and incredible amount of wisdom as well.
And so I could see you doing that as well. I could see you doing that with the I Empower Summit, bringing women together to talk women's stuff. It would be nice to see that starts to develop in the culture. When I get together with girlfriends, definitely we talk about changing bodies and things that are going on for us. When I was living in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, I went to a few women's groups. So that was really nice, but that was more of a formalized setting. So it would be really nice to see it just become part of the culture. I guess we're leading the way.
Sulin. One step at a time.
Yeah.
When we were at the I Empower Summit, I know that some of the ladies that attended then told me, Sulin is fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And they were really curious about what you put in your water. Do you remember a little bit of what you told them? And I remember lemon, rosemary. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Were we talking about mixing herbal teas into my water?
I believe so.
I just have to say, today I am drinking lemon with, it's called a glycetract. So I put all these different herbs like sage and thyme and marshmallow root into glycerin and water, and then I leave it there for 2 weeks, and then I strain it. That's what I'm drinking today. I do try to drink normal water, but it's usually like elevated water. So I think what I was drinking on that day from memory would have been my mix of the day. So it's vitamin C powder, magnesium powder. There was a protein powder in there as well, because we need to make sure we're getting enough protein for, I guess, our muscle to fat ratio, and having the energy to talk as well. I had my brain functioning too, so I needed that. And then I had, I think I might have been talking about adding rosemary tea in because it helps with the circulation of blood flow to your brain. And that is one of the things that changes a little bit around menopause and after menopause, particularly brain fog is a really kind of dominant sign of postmenopause. So I was talking about using that. And also the sage is really good in tea for hot flashes. What I will often do is if I've got the time, make a smoothie, and then I'll put my, fruits and cucumber and a bit of coconut yogurt into the blender, coconut water. And I see that as my luxury, by the way. So I'm not going to count calories on what's in the coconut yogurt and the coconut water, because I'm so good the rest of the day. And then I will often pour whatever tea I have on the bench, which can be anything. It could be ginger tea or lemongrass tea or chamomile tea. Now, these herbs are actually very rich in polyphenols, and polyphenols are part of that Mediterranean diet. So if you're wanting to kind of boost your brain health and stave off the onset of Alzheimer's, dementia, and so on, then the polyphenols are essential for you to have in your diet. And drinking a good herbal tea every day will give you a little bit of that. It'll give you some anti-inflammatories. Sometimes if it's chamomile, it'll give you calcium and magnesium. If it's something like rosemary, it will give you antioxidants. So drinking a tea is not just about tasting something nice. It's actually a healing ritual for your body.
Yeah, you don't have to convince me. I was listening to the list of what you put in your tea, and I was like, this is what I put in my food, really. That's like my base the base things of what I put in my food, well, depending on whether I'm cooking a specific Tunisian meal or if it's a French meal, but there's always some basic ones that are thyme, rosemary, bay leaf. These are like the bare minimum, and then there's more. And so like, when I hear you, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's basically the same thing, only I don't put it in my tea, although sometimes I do. And I'm sure we've got a very similar kitchen. I'm like full of jars with all sorts of herbs and little dried things. And I feel like a proper witch every time I'm about to make a tea.
I love that. Absolutely.
There's a lot that we talked about in our conversation regarding obviously hormonal change, and it's not just the sexual hormones, it's hormones in general. And with the background that I have, doing work on anxiety and fear, we often talk about, cortisol and adrenaline and all these players, I'm going to say. But generally about, the effect of your mental game on your body. Do you feel like when it comes to hormones that are sexual hormones as well, but perimenopause in general and with all the, components of it, do you feel like mental health also plays a role in the symptoms themselves and or how we perceive them? I mean, how we perceive them, of course, that makes sense to me, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think that our mental health, our mindset, how we're feeling that day will always play a role on our hormones. All we're doing really is sending messages back to the messages. We've seen in some studies that women who have suffered from depression in the past are 3 to 4 times more likely to have more severe depression in perimenopause and postmenopause. There's definitely links between our mental state as we're edging into perimenopause and how we're going to fare as we get closer to postmenopause. With the production of certain hormones like cortisol, if you're stressed out all the time, that's where you'll see that direct relationship. So the cortisol hormone will increase, possibly so will your aldosterone, and you'll start looking a bit puffy. And as a kind of knock-on effect from that, your progesterone will drop. Because whenever you have high stress levels in the body, it means that your body calls out to whatever hormones are available to soothe the stress. Now, cortisol shifts the blood flow to your heart, helps you get strong, makes you run, gives you the vigilance and mental capacity to handle what might be happening to you. I mean, it could be that you got like a stain on your favorite apron. Like you could be catastrophizing. You'll still get the same effect. Cortisol will be elevated. And so it's kind of doing its thing. But what's controlling it? What's reining it in? What's trying to bring the body back into homeostasis and balance? It's hormones like your progesterone. So there is a direct link between being chronically stressed and overwhelmed and having lower progesterone than you normally would in perimenopause. And then we know what happens when you have lower progesterone. You have more estrogen because the balance starts to tip a little bit, and then you get heavier bleeds. Maybe your fibroids start growing, or fibroids get bigger, or there's other issues that might go on there as well. So that's probably one of the more sort of standout ones. The other hormones that can get affected are the metabolic ones. So insulin particularly can get affected by chronic stress. And the pathway to diabetes isn't just eating a lot of sugar. It's actually being highly stressed. I saw this in my dad. But my dad was Southeast Asian heritage, so a lot more likely to develop diabetes. He developed it in his 70s, which is a clear sign at that stage of life that it was stress-induced. And, I think it was a very stressful... because it came on
later. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. And not kind of like in the 40s, like in the 70s. So it was that chronic buildup of stress. He wasn't overweight. He ate a good diet. He probably had a few too many processed oils. But, he didn't eat candies and things like that. So I couldn't see any correlation with diet in his case.
And I
more with
find the
stress.
same with my auntie. I was having a chat with her not too long ago, and she was like, "Oh, because it's Ramadan at the moment, and so people are fasting from first light till last light, which, as you mentioned earlier, is not necessarily good when you're going through perimenopause. She's in her menopause, so she's past that. But she was telling me how she's got diabetes. And I'm like, how is that happening considering your diet? Like, this is very, but then again, women are extremely stressed, much more than the average person, I think. And we have a lot on our shoulders to make everything work. I mean, her story is incredible. I was talking to her last time I went there, and she was telling me when I first started as a nurse, we were paid 2 dinars. That's a couple of cents for the day. And I'm like, that's crazy. That is insane. Men were paid 40 times more. And so, of course, that's the kind of situations which will increase stress.
Absolutely. And then also, a lot of us that are in perimenopause and postmenopause now are Generation X women. The women who are starting to tip into, this might be you, tip into perimenopause, are millennials. So Gen X, 1965 to 1975 or something like that. And then, or maybe 1976, and then millennials at 1977 to, say, can't remember what exactly it was, 77 to 85 or 90 or something like that. But the amount of pressure that Gen X women particularly put on themselves to do everything and be everything to everyone and make sure that they are working hard at work and hard at home and parenting. And they're also often having kids late. So they're kind of caught in the crossroads between having teenage kids and having parents to care for. So that will be a contributor to stress. Pressure. Yeah, it'll probably play a role in the amount of metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease that's drawn from metabolic issues rather than alcohol, and insulin resistance. Like that'll be playing a role in women developing those sorts of conditions today, whereas maybe our mothers and grandmothers didn't. My mother has passed now, and I didn't get to see her menopause journey very well. She was born 1948. So I'm not sure what generation that's considered, but she had a type of cancer in her bone marrow. And so when she started treatment for that, it stopped her periods. Yeah.
That's really hard on the body.
Yeah, really hard. She was quite delighted. I think she was over having periods. She had 4 kids. She'd done her thing. So she was really happy about that. She had a wonderful doctor and everything. But I didn't get to see how it all went for her. She was Australian, Caucasian, blue eyes, blonde hair. I mean, who's to know? I don't know whether I got her genes in that regard or from my father's side.
Yeah. Not sure. I mean, it's the same thing being a mixed race. It's always an interesting play here because there's a lot of variables, a lot more variables.
Exactly. And we're third culture. We're third 100%. Culture, not second. Yeah.
Exactly. And that changes things as well. I mean, my mom, the way she was raised is very different than the way I was raised, even though she is the person that raised me most of the time. So I got a lot of what she got, but it was in a different context. And I'm in the same page as you in that I did not see her go through even perimenopause. So your mother being Caucasian, and, we're talking about our mothers and our grandmothers and how they were affected by stress differently. Again, there's this idea that they might have been affected by stress differently because the sense of community was very different too. And so that's another component that's massive for us, is that there's this almost broken part of society where we don't really have that baseline community, where we don't really have that support, and we have to create it for ourselves in our nucleus family if we're lucky enough to have a stable one. So there's a lot at play. And for me, in a lot of the work that I do, it seems to me that the greatest messenger of all, even underneath hormones, even underneath the mind, is really emotions. And we're in a society that makes us believe that not all emotions are welcome, that we need to push down a lot of them, which takes away a lot of information and definitely increases stress. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind of the link between repressed emotion and anxiety or depression. And so these, when you think of stress and the ability to handle stress, when you think of resilience to stress and the impact that it has on our hormonal bodies, our physiology, on the way we feel, on the way we understand ourselves, not having that crucial element is massive. And I think that's something that potentially is also missing research in general has a lot missing, but even in the understanding of health. And slowly we're getting there, but for now, I think it seems to me that the step is getting into mental health rather than emotional health as the source. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I'm sure you see women coming in and telling you about all sorts of physiological symptoms, and then as you dig, you go, well.
Yes. And look, I've heard so many women say, I'm not stressed, and I'm sorry, your pulse doesn't lie.
Let me tell you this.
And also, I've been there. I know it. I see it. I can recognize it. Yeah, I think that emotions are the originating cause of most dis-ease. And if we go into the traditional Chinese medicine model, which works extremely well with hormonal conditions, you only have to have an acupuncture session to know how good it is with regulating hormones. They conceptualize the body as being composed of different organ systems. And those organ systems, the one that is especially important for women in midlife is the liver system. And the liver system is all about emotions. It's kind of the seat of emotions. And I think this is also why for a lot of women in midlife, we get issues with our livers. Liver, for example, is the organ system that controls your glucose levels, how you break down fat, how regularly you go to the toilet. And it also controls a lot of that heat that can sometimes escape and rise up and give us a hot flush. So I see liver as being very central, and that's probably the one system that I'm always on about. Yes, I look at the ovaries, and yes, I look at the uterus and vaginal health and everything, but I never neglect the liver because it is so central. And our livers get really stagnant in midlife. And from that stagnation comes the one primary emotion that perimenopause could be, I guess, encapsulated with. Yes, so this one primary emotion is irritability. And if you notice that you're getting irritable, not just at particular times of your menstrual cycle, but it's an ongoing thing.
In general,
and then maybe it kind of moves into hostility. And then maybe from hostility, it develops into sharpness, saying things, but kind of like not just saying them, but really saying them. And then it develops into anger. So these are all liver symptoms, if you like, liver expressions. And what the body is trying to do, in my opinion, is to give a voice because you're not speaking up for yourself. So it's giving a voice as in, I don't want to do that. I don't like the way this happens. I don't want that. This is not what I expected. I don't want you here, or whatever it might be. However, whatever comes out, it's kind of that innate force in the body that is going to get it out somehow, or it will come up as a hot flash or something else in some other physiological way. And once you do that, it clears the emotion. Yeah, so it's kind of like just the body's process for allowing all emotions, even the ones we try to hide and shadow and not recognize, just allowing them to come up. You can blame your liver, it's fine. You can say, I got liver issues, that's why I'm feeling a bit livery. That's all fine. Yeah. But this concept of emotions, we can never overlook it. We could use those emotions to guide us. We know they're always going to be there in perimenopause because it is an emotional event just as much as it is a physical event. And always go back to your liver health. If you've got a lot of emotional stuff going on, look after your liver.
Yeah. And I think that's it goes both ways, right? You have those automated responses that tell you, okay, first of all, your liver is telling you something here. And so then understanding that it's going to come out, but it can be also the other way. You can see your liver, see the markers for me, that was that journey, actually. That's how I started figuring it out. I went through chronic fatigue. I did all sorts of tests and stuff. And every time I get tested, my liver is the one that shows up. And so eventually I started looking into what it meant. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized, okay, it's the seat of certain emotions, including anger. And as I started doing a lot of trauma work and connecting to my, first of all, my liver told me, okay, we need to work on things that are relating to anger, which kind of closed the loop in terms of what I was looking for. And then I started working on the emotions, which alleviated the tiredness, which, it started to just fall into place. And so for me, the trauma work is what helped my liver, and my liver is what helped me go back to my trauma work. So I think it's very important when we look at things to think it goes both ways. So as much as you can help your liver, and I ate lots of Brussels sprouts and drank, was it milk thistle or whatever it's called?
Mary's thistle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
To support my liver, because I knew it was going to support it. And then with that, it helps you unfold the emotional background. And at the same time, going the other way, working on the emotional background will help your liver. So it's always a communication with our health and well-being in general. And I think it's important to know, because then it doesn't matter what shows up for you. As long as you start somewhere, it's going to start unfolding a thread, and slowly it will improve. So even with perimenopause, when you look at the markers, you can also think, okay, well, I can work on those. I can work on other things that will help work on those. It doesn't matter where you start, as long as you start. And that does help empower ourselves, I think, knowing doesn't matter where you start, as long as you start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely get that feedback effect. And not only, I guess, benefits for your liver, but you'll be helping your hormones. And your hormones, they're trying to do the best that they can for you. So, yeah, whatever you can do to support them, you'll have a better experience of postmenopause and the lead up to menopause.
And life in general.
Yes.
We've covered a lot. Is there anything else you'd like to share with regards to hormones, perimenopause, your life journey, herbs, anything that comes to mind that you think would be helpful?
Yes. When you asked me, what would be helpful before, I was thinking all of those things like eating certain foods and looking at research that's been done on women, etc. Yes, all very helpful, but it might be a little bit overwhelming for women. And I just want to say, find yourself a good nutritionist or naturopath, or somebody who has the ability to do that background research for you, so you don't have to do it all yourself. If you're finding that you're in midlife and you are probably working, caring, cleaning, like cooking, doing all the stuff.
And used to doing everything yourself.
Yes.
Don't add another thing to your plate.
Exactly. So feel free to reach out to someone like me, or even reach out to me. We do all that work in terms of putting together how you eat, so a diet protocol or exercise recommendations we can do to some degree, but we'll always be able to refer on. I also want to mention for any women who are wondering how to exercise, to check out the work of Dr. Stacey Sims. She's done amazing work, and also busting a lot of myths and looking at research on women. So
she's exceptional.
Yeah, I think that's where I would point people to. And then, again, be your own advocate for your hormone health. I mean, no one else is going to be. So take steps and put yourself first, which is sometimes something we find very difficult to do. But it will definitely be worth it, because in all honesty, you might be looking at a couple of years at the moment if you're symptomatic and thinking, I'll just push through. You're not necessarily thinking about the 20 or 30 years that you're going to be spending in a postmenopausal body and mind. So this is really, really where we want to start being very proactive.
And when women say, but I've got to take care of my son, my girl, my kids, my partner, my work, how much better would you be able to do that if you're feeling vital and healthy? So at the end of the day, if you're not able to say it's for me, say it's for the others. Doesn't matter how you get to it.
That's true. That's so true. Great point.
Thank you so much, Sulin. That was an amazing chat. We could go for hours. We could talk about plants for hours. I'm sure we'll have other opportunities to do that. People can find you on your website, www.herbalwell.com.au. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm also on the socials. I'm on Instagram at perimenopause.naturopath. And I'm on YouTube just Sulin Sze. I have a lot of videos on YouTube, so hopefully that will be helpful for some women.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this conversation. I am very, very grateful. Now I'm sure we'll have many more interesting conversations.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you so much, Sonia. It's been beautiful spending this time with you.
Thank you so much for listening. If this episode resonated, it would mean the world if you could like, follow, share, rate the podcast. It helps us get discovered and share the love. All of the guest resources will be in the show notes, including links, offerings, discounts, and anything you might need to go deeper. And if you want more tools, reflections, or behind-the-scene moments, feel free to follow us on social media or to have a look at womenmakewaves.com.au. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, stay true to yourself.